Mr. Speaker, this budget is disastrous for the American economy. It will balloon our deficits, it will lead to higher interest rates, and will make the things Americans buy every day more expensive. It will slash critical investments in the things that make us healthier, safer, and more productive, things like cancer research, aviation security, and our national park system. And it will decimate critical programs that support the people we represent, stripping health care from millions and make it harder for families to put food on the table and make ends meet. All of this for billionaires and corporations that get tax cuts they do not need and that our country cannot afford. I'm pleased to do this with my friend, Chairman Schweikert. I also believe in math, and I rarely brag, but I'm good at math. Americans have been clear. They want lower prices and an economy that works for them. Yet instead of focusing on making life easier for American families, at every turn, this administration and our Republican colleagues have engaged in a scorched earth policy, a policy that creates chaos across the country as the richest person on the planet eliminates services that our nation depends upon. My friend from South Carolina earlier said the policies would bankrupt our country. What's he mean? Health care for our families? Food for the working poor who overwhelmingly live in Republican districts? Sure, get rid of any identified bloat, as every president does. But this is a budget about billionaires, not about the every American women, men, and children we represent. Yes, I want to move towards a much smaller budget deficit. I listen to David Schweikert every closing afternoon during his special order hours. I hate the higher interest costs. But who pays? Our families or the 1,000 billionaires, that small percentage, 1% or less, of American population that has way more wealth than they could ever spend in lifetimes to come? You know, this budget depends on, my Republicans have long sung from the altar of fiscal responsibility, yet the plan they put in front of us today is a fiscal sacrilege. It depends on fantasy math. It ignores that their deficit-busting tax breaks will add at least $4.6 trillion on our nation's credit card, adding even more interest that our families must pay. And this interest has real costs. It slows economic growth. It depresses the standard of living. It leads to higher inflation and higher interest rates, and it makes it even harder for families already faced with high prices and borrowing costs to make ends meet. Wasteful, woke, and weaponized policies, my friend from Texas said, that's a very small percentage of the federal budget. You're going to never achieve what's in this budget resolution on wasteful, woke, and weaponized policies. So what is this Republican plan? How do they address? They double down on the policies that will widen the growing wealth gap this nation by giving billionaires trillions in handouts while providing pennies to the middle class. According to the Treasury Department, the top 1% of Americans, those making over $750,000 a year, can expect to get an annual tax cut of over $32,000. Working families will see a tiny fraction of that. Of course, the other main beneficiaries will be the wealthiest executives of the wealthiest corporations at a time when corporate profits are at an all-time high. Americans who rely on government services will be told they need to make sacrifices to pad those profit margins even further. How does that make any sense? To pay for these tax cuts for the ultra-wealthy, the Republican budget proposes to cut programs Americans rely on to afford health care and to put food on the table. Almost 100 million Americans, including seniors, children, families, and those from every corner of this country, depend on Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act to afford medical care. Yet this budget would slash almost $900 billion from these critical programs, ripping away life-saving coverage and raising health care costs for those who rely on them. And at a time when prices at the grocery stores continue to climb, this budget would make it even harder for the 40 million Americans who rely on SNAP to put food on the table. The budget we are considering today will nothing to support the economic growth of this nation. It will benefit the wealthiest at the expense of those who make this country work, and I urge my colleagues to reject it. With that, I reserve, Madam Speaker.